Anyway, I'm Deborah Nowers, and I am nominally the program chair and the vice president of this, vice something or other, of the, of the Wawenoc chapter of the Maine Genealogical Society. And this was a request from Rick, who isn't here. So, what does that say? He asked if I would talk a little bit about gravestones and cemeteries, and I said I would do that. I am not an expert. I will say that really loud. I've been taking pictures of my ancestors' gravestones since the 70s, which is, an indication of how long I've been doing this. Later in the 80s, I dragged my photographer husband around, and so some of these pictures are old. They were taken when I first knew him and said, "Hey, wouldn't you like to go take pictures of gravestones with me?" And since he was smitten, he agreed. So that's sort of, and you'll be able to tell some of those stones. As I said, my first sort of caveat is I am going to talk about cemeteries a little bit. I'm going to talk about the materials that gravestones are made of. And then later I'm going to show you some pictures of our work in gravestones, and you'll get a chance to see sort of what we do and what's possible and what in some cases not possible. I also know very little about iconography on stones, so I will make a couple of notions about them, but I am no expert at all. I only say lots of these stones have this kind of patterns and these have this kind of patterns, and that's as much as I can tell you. And I don't know what they mean either. And again, I mostly refer to burying places or burial grounds. The use of the cemeteries came in when they moved the burying grounds out of the church and out of the downtown. And then once they were out in the countryside more, they became more typically called cemeteries, which is from the Greek, Latin, whatever, as place of rest. So that's now if I can make my clicker work, well, good. The earliest examples of burying places. One note, this is New England. I live in New England. That's the only place I've ever lived. These are all New England stones. Let's look at the examples of burying places that I could find. They are church and town burying grounds. We know that the first settlers in Plymouth were sneaking out in the middle of the night that first winter to bury those who were dying, however many of them that died that first winter, because they didn't want anybody to know so many were dying. But by 1622, they had established a proper cemetery on Burial Hill in Plymouth. And then over on the other side is the old granary burying ground in Boston, and that's from 1660. And it is the third burying ground in Boston. My ancestor, Reverend John Wilson, who was the first minister of First Church, is nominally buried here. There's a tomb that holds the remains of the earliest ministers. Their remains having been moved from one burying ground to another burying ground and finally to granary. So I'm guessing it's his left index finger that's in there, but some piece of him is supposed to be there. And you can see in these pictures, both of these graves, the graves are in straight rows with the graves facing east, supposedly to face the rising sun. But lots of the earliest settlers were not buried in any established place. They were buried in the back 40 or someplace that we don't know. Colonel Andrew Tyler, a Revolutionary soldier, is buried with his wife Hannah in a pasture near his house on aptly named Tyler Street in Frankfort. It's a lovely double stone, and perhaps because they were prominent and wealthy, they are buried all by themselves in their field. It's right in front of their house. You can, if you're willing to drive down somebody's driveway and walk across their yard and look at the stone, you can look at it. I was with somebody who knew the people, and so it was like, they probably won't shoot me or send out the dogs. Daniel and Sarah Putnam on the other side, and that's one of my black and white photographer 1980 stones. They are my ancestors as well, and they are buried, as the town history states, in a small disused yard on their own farm. And there's a both Daniel and Sarah are children of Revolutionary soldiers, and shortly after the Revolution, they moved, like many people were on the move at that point, moved to Newbury, Vermont. I worked one summer in now I'm showing my age, in 1973, I was working at a summer camp in Vermont. And if anybody has ever been a counselor at a girls' camp and you work 6.5 days a week, on your half day, you go anywhere away from teenage girls. And so I went hunting for Daniel and it was very quiet. Daniel and Sarah Stones in the disused lot on their own yard. And I had directions from the town offices. I went to the town offices and said, hey, where is this? And they said, well, you take this road, that road, take around that big tree, go over there and go that way. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And I tried to do this way, that way around the big tree. I put 60 miles on dirt roads on my car that day. And I'm driving along thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm going to go face the teenage girls. This is awful. So I was standing there, sitting in my car waiting. And this is rural Vermont. Walking down the road towards me is this black man. And I thought, this is out of context. I mean, he has perfectly any right to be walking down this road, but walking in Vermont, what's going on? And so I thought, what the heck? I said, hey, do you happen to know whether there are any gravestones in a field nearby? And he said, yeah, right down there. Literally at the bottom of the field, right where I was parked, there they were, in the woods. The rest of that story is also that I was crawling around looking at Sarah Stone, and I scratched my cornea. I had to go to Mary Hitchcock Hospital in Hanover, get my face patched. So I arrived back at camp that day with a huge bandage on my face and having had a lovely day hunting for gravestones. And so, but some families did in fact establish family burying grounds. This one is the Ide Family Cemetery in Frankfurt. It's a beautiful example. It's surrounded by a wall of, you can see, 4 layers high of cut granite. The stones, and it houses 16 graves and of white marble for Ide family members. These stones are flattened now. As you can see, they're either lying on the ground or against the wall. But they must have been absolutely spectacular in the middle 1800s when it was a cemetery full of shiny white stones. And the 16 of them are all family members, Ide descendants of Ezra Ide or spouses. In the middle of nowhere, on the top of a mountain. And you'll see more of that later because this happens to be one of I'm obsessed with this cemetery, just in case you haven't guessed. As the towns grew, and the burying grounds in the church or by the center of town filled up, residents looked to move farther out where there was empty space. They established cemeteries outside of the crowded towns. Grove Cemetery was established in 1831. It certainly isn't out of town now, and included graves from the former burying place under what is now the Baptist Church. You know, everybody knows I have no direction. There, across on the other side of the street, and some of the stones that are in Grove predate its establishment in 1831. I don't know whether they moved the people or whether they moved the stones or whether they left some stones, moved some stones. I don't know what it is, but it is at least the second and perhaps the third burying place in Belfast. Out on the east side is an earlier cemetery, and it's there again. It was one of those disasters. Somebody decided to clear it with a bulldozer, and so it got rid of the trees. It also got rid of the graves, the stones. Any stones that were bucked over got crushed. It's a very sad place. If you go out on Route 1 and you know where the mailbox sign is, that's up in the airmail sign up there. It's down that road. I have been into that cemetery. There are a few standing stones left, but not much. It's very sad. But out on the other side, on the east side, at the corner of Belfast and Swanville, residents from that area purchased land to create a burying ground convenient to where they lived. In 1848, John Parsons, and we're going to hear about the Parsons later, sold 68 acres of his farm in Belfast to the Belfast and Swanville Burying Company, and they created what is now Smart Cemetery. John Parsons is buried there, but only his footstone survives. There's kind of a lump of rock where his stone was or wasn't. Finally, we got grand, and they started to create garden cemeteries, and they came into fashion. And the first garden cemetery, Mount Auburn, is in Cambridge, and it was established in 1831. It replaced the straight paths with the stones facing east, with winding paths through a landscape park. The garden cemeteries, from the Greek and Latin, means sleeping place, were envisioned as a place of rest for the dead and for the living. It was viewed as a park, and it was perfectly reasonable to go and take your picnic and sit in Mount Auburn and have a picnic in the park. Portland Cemetery developed its own garden cemetery, Evergreen, in 1854. So now that's the transition from bury them under a rock to the garden cemeteries. And then the change in what the stones were made of also had a similar evolution. And the first stones were, well, my first look at the field stones were because the DAR allows you to use tombstones as evidence for births and deaths, but only if the stone is contemporary to the event. So you can't, if you put up a new stone for your great-grandfather, it doesn't count. So it's important to know, to be able to look at a stone and say, okay, is that really, an 1850 stone? Or, no, that doesn't make sense. One of my ancestors has a replacement stone that looks very nice. It's a very nice grayish black slate stone, but clearly it doesn't look right. It's too thick and whatever. It's a replacement. He also has another stone in another cemetery, which is, I'm not going there. Yeah, he did, I guess. Gravestones, as I said, they followed a similar pattern. In earliest times, stones were placed over bodies to keep them from rising, and to protect the body from animals. These stone markers might be found on a family farm, in a farm field, in a family designated spot, or in an established cemetery. For people of limited needs, they continued long after there were carved stones. The row of rocks that you can clearly see running back in the cemetery were not put there by Mother Nature. They are clearly grave markers of some sort. And the folks that were in the Seacon Cemetery in Swanville did not have much money. I know actually more than I should about them. And the one gravestone that is there, the biggest one, is for Josiah Seacons. And this one is the genealogist's nightmare. On one side lists him and his two wives. I think you can probably see that in the screen. But if you look carefully, and on the two sides, it lists the 3 boys and the 3 girls who died as children. He did have 22 children, so. But it lists only age at death. No birth, no death. So I don't know which of the children belong to which of the wives, unless you can find some other information. I thought it was a very strange thing to do. I've never seen another one that only lists age at death. Okay. So there we have little rocks. And then we move, these are the earliest of the stones that are in cemeteries in New England. These two are in Bradford, Massachusetts. And they are my ancestors. They are, the earliest stones were made of either sandstone, and not so much sandstone in New England, but schist, which is a form of slate, and it has vertical, it's a sedimentary rock, so it has vertical fishes in it, I guess. Yeah. So, but they were relatively soft, and they could be carved by less skilled craftsmen. Benjamin Kimball's stone in the Bradford Cemetery is the only 17th century stone of one of my ancestors that I know of. But it has been able to withstand more than 300 New England winters. And when we went to photograph the stones, they were safely in the back of the cemetery, surrounded by waist-high poison ivy. So they are well protected back there. And I can make one comment about the iconography. The stylized face with the wings was very common on most of the stones from that era. I have a number of early 18th century stones that look very much like this. I have to hunt through and say which one's which. But that's, and there you can see on both of the stones, you can see where they have sheared off in various places. But I think they're looking pretty good for having been there for 300 years, actually 325 years. The first names are spelled differently too. This is Benjamin with an E, Kimball with an I. His wife has Benjamin without the E and Kimball with an E. Spelling was not standard. You can spell it any way you want, as long as they knew phonics. And if anybody's looked at old records, you find the same names, the same words, sometimes spelled differently in the same record. Oh, well, let's spell it that way. Let's spell it that way. No, I have a photographer. No, these have not been touched. Henry took these pictures in the 80s. But that is having a photographer who knows how to take pictures. It is in a cemetery in Bradford, Massachusetts. And I actually have a bunch more. This is slate stones, and these are all slate stones, are my favorite. I like them because they're shiny and black, and they have nice, crisp carving. But they also have some downsides, as you can see if you look at the stones. They are soft enough to allow beautiful carving with crisp lines, but also because it is a sedimentary stone, it's prone to splitting and breaking off, and they break easily. So as you can see, Hannah Nickel stone is sheared off at the bottom. Across here, there's a piece missing. And poor Hannah Bean stone has fallen, likely fell over when it broke at the bottom, and then was trampled either by people, lawnmowers, or whatever. Because when I found it, I only found it because I stepped on it. I didn't hear it crunch, so I don't think I broke it. But so I uncovered it, and then I'm not sure, it's way above my skill set to try to repair that one. I left it on the ground and covered it over again to protect it. And it's all leaves and garbage, so I don't think the lawnmower is going to get it. We can hope that, it survives. But Moses Smith is an example of a stone that looked like we could have carved it yesterday. It's in North Searsport. He's a Revolutionary soldier. And his stone is, there it is, looking bright and crisp and just beautiful, which is what slate does for you. And again, it has the next later motif after the wings and the face. You see lots of, weeping willows once you get into the late 1700s, early 1800s. And then we have marble stones. And if you go into a gravesite and you see rows and rows and rows of gray stones, they're almost all marble stones that have turned gray. And they seem to come in sort of three types. The one on the left is a monument. It lists on the four sides, there are 4 families, husband, wife, children. Everybody had children who died young. So there's died young children on all of them. one of them is a Revolutionary soldier, which is why we were there taking its picture and cleaning it. The one next to it is the wife of a Revolutionary soldier, and is what you see. This is, to be honest, it's one step of cleaning, and we'll see it again. The first time you clean a marble stone, it usually turns this horrible yellow-orange color. The first time I did it, I thought, what have I done? Oh my God, it was gray, it was sort of legible, but oh my Lord, what have I done? But I have discovered that they recover. So this is a tablet stone. It is in the ground in a granite base. Most of the marble stones that are this sort of regular gravestone shape are in a base of granite with a slot in the bottom, a mortise, and then the stone fits inside, is mortared in with soft mortar, and then it's covered. The granite is supposed to be covered by about 2 or 3 inches, which also supports the stone, protects the granite, all of that. What has happened with many of them is someone decided in their wisdom that the base is supposed to show, and we're going to use more Portland cement, and we're going to cement them in there so they don't fall over. The result of that is what you see with Christina. They don't fall over easily, so they break. Where in the old days, they would have just toppled. And then somebody could have said, okay, stand it up and put it back in the base, and there it is. And then we have the problem with the one on the right. That's a 3-piece marble stone. It has a base on the bottom, then a base in the middle, and then the stone is put on top. And it is held together with pins, iron pins. And anybody know what happens to iron pins exposed to weather in New England? Is they rust. And what makes it even worse is they held them in with sulfur. So they filled the holes with sulfur, put the iron pins in, and that was going to make them stay better, I guess. But what it succeeded in doing was rusting the pins. And then, as you can see, over they go. This one hasn't fallen over, but you can see, on the right-hand side, you can see where the pin is and the stone is broken away. Very often you see both corners gone. They say they've been blown out. Both corners are gone and the stone is over. And so it's a matter of trying, if you can find the corners, epoxying the corners back together again. You have to drill out the old iron pin and replace it. And when we were in the Haldal Cemetery, I don't know who was with me. Janine was, no, but Janine was, when somebody was saying, should we put, they weren't very loud. Somebody said, way over there, should we put the iron pins back in? I heard them and hollered at the time, no! No! And they looked at me like, what's with this woman is insane. I said, no, they need to be, the best we do now is stainless steel. It still may corrode, but it's not going to be like, it's the most stable thing we can think of. So it's a matter of drilling out the old, replacing it with appropriate mortar, and putting it back up. And then these are white bronze or cast zinc, which is what they really are. I first learned about these stones when I took a tour at Evergreen Cemetery in Portland. Thank you, Mary Foley. She hear me? Later, I was astonished to see many of them in the Hillside Cemetery in Monroe, including this amazing Civil War monument. The monuments could be ordered from a catalog through an agent from the Monument Bronze Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Various designs were included in the catalog, and once the designs were selected, they were cast, sometimes in several pieces, put back together again, and then specially crafted plaques were bolted on. And you can see it's pretty clear that, and they stand up really, really well. Those stones have been sitting there for 100 years. They don't seem to get lichens, mice, nothing awful happens to them. The only issue that is with them is they are hollow. So if you want to whack them with a, if you want to have a fun time smashing gravestones in a cemetery, for fun, hit them with a sledgehammer and they will break. So if you want to do that, I'll tell you how. Yeah. I had never noticed one before because you walk by, it's just a gravestone. It's a gray stone. It looks like all the millions of other gravestones in the cemetery until Mary said, and I said, oh. But the ones there's a whole bunch of them you can see in the background of this one, there's another one in Monroe. The salesman in Monroe must have been very, very persuasive. Somebody bought a lot of those stones. Yeah, that's right. And I don't know how expensive they were. That's not clear. But somebody spent a lot of money for that Civil War monument. It's big. It's really big. So it's my clicker. All right. And now we have granite stones. They came into fashion in the later half of the 19th century, and they are the universal stones in gravestones now, in graveyards now. Now that we have more powerful cutting tools, it's easier to cut granite and it made intricate carving easier. The stones are very hard, resistant to damage, and today it's rare to see a new monument in a cemetery that is not granite. That's just what's out there. I couldn't resist the one on the left. I thought, what possessed somebody to do that? There's one nearby that's a cylinder, the same balancing on the top. I don't know what it is. The stone on the right is very common. There's a bunch of them that look like this in Grove Cemetery. With this raised carving on the bottom with the name, which is very difficult to do and very expensive. So if you look around, you know who had money in Belfast and who didn't. George Washington Cottrell was a shipbuilder here in Belfast. Now I've spent a lot of time learning all of this stuff, and the project we worked on was I had this strange inspiration that I wanted to find all of the Revolutionary War gravestones in Waldo County that existed, document them, clean them if they needed to be cleaned, repair them if they needed to be repaired. That was my mission. I rounded up, what I called a flash mob, and I sent out an email to people and said, the people who were on the list, and I said, I'm going to be in XY cemetery at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. If you're free, come. And people came, and I didn't have to tell me, they just kind of show up or not. And it was great fun. We had a really good time. This year has been total craziness, and I have only called upon the flash bomb, I think once or twice. But I'm determined to try to get some more done before the end of the year. Most of the stones we're finding now, and you'll see later, they're mostly intact. They're mostly legible. And so we're going to be doing more documenting than cleaning and repairing, that's a good thing because we've done lots of cleaning, lots of repairing. So let's start with the gravestone project. And Kay Dallafeld, a member of our chapter, made this great sign. And so we walk around, and when we're in a cemetery, we plunk the sign in the ground so nobody thinks that we're there tipping gravestones. This is in evidence at the village cemetery in Searsport. This was our first mission. We received a phone call or a message from a DAR member who lived in California, whose parents, elderly parents, I must say, were living in Montville, and they had ancestors in the White Corner Cemetery in Montville. And she asked if we would look at the stone. And Kate, who lives in Liberty, a member of our chapter, went out and looked, and she said, oh my Lord. And this was not even on the list of stones that I had a preliminary list that was done a while ago from MOCA of, Revolutionary stuff. Nobody had even listed Joseph Bartlett. And I'm not surprised that nobody found that stone. That's what it looked like when we walked in and said, oh Lord, what are we going to do? We cleaned. We worked around, we righted it and cleaned it, put it up. And the one thing we did do is we left the footstones where they are. Several people told us that if you put the footstones where they belong, which is, you know, at the foot of the grave, they often get whacked by lawnmowers, and, you know, just because they're small and it's easy to hit them. And so if somebody has moved the footstones next to the gravestone, we leave them there, just because I would rather have them be in the wrong place and intact than in the right place and smashed. So this is White's Corner, and this was our, you know, this was sort of the introduction to, yes, we can do this. And this is one of my favorite. Jill in the back, who lives on Pitcher Road, said to me, you know, there's a cemetery there and it's got this stone in it. And we went looking, and this is what we found on the left. And this is a cemetery. This is a Revolutionary soldier, although you sure wouldn't know it to look at that stone. It is unfortunately under a cedar tree. So it's, you know, it's collected all kinds of goop. Our first job was to just clean the stuff off, all the moss, all that stuff, with just water and plastic scrapers, just to see what we could find. We then washed it, cleaned it with a biocide. And when we left that day, that's what the two stones looked like. And I have used this as examples to people, and, you know, the magic happens. And I'll let you see the magic happen in a little while. But then one of the things with the biocide is it keeps working. And so by the winter, this is what they look like. They are beautiful. They are legible. Well, who knows? They are still under that cedar tree. So, so I think that there will be moss and goop on at least on them again. And we envisioned Simon and Lydia looking across the, you know, there they are looking across to the mountain. And it's a beautiful spot. They did tend to put cemeteries in nice spots. Not that you want a house on some of these places. This is again, Pitcher Road is a dirt road. This kind of, if it's a Brigadoon stone, if you come from one direction, you never see the cemetery. If you come from the other direction, you can see it. And the road goes up like this and around, and there's the cemetery on a hill. But, and actually, Jill, while you're here, could you talk about the people who met you? Okay.
Hi. One day my husband and I were driving by, and there was a car parked. You have to walk up to the cemetery. You can't do that road now. But there was a car parked there. So we stopped just to make sure everything was okay. And we met a gentleman up there from Illinois who had done his genealogy research. This was his ancestors. And he was so excited that we had done the work, and thanked all of us for doing that. So yep. That was kind of exciting to,
yeah, when you find descendants, that's the most fun, you know,
right?
Because I don't have anybody buried in Maine, but those old stones, when I found them, it's like, oh, I feel a connection to those people who are, and I'm going to cry, never mind. And this is just to let you see the process. If I can I make this work? Oh, no, let's not. Let's make it work. This is a stone that was wet and then sprayed with D2 and lightly rubbed. I mean, just very lightly rubbed. And this is a low pressure washer. You never use high pressure on these marble stones. And if you watch it appear, you will see. That's the wind. Sorry about that. Much as I said that Josiah Seacon stone was the genealogist's nightmare, this is the genealogist's dream. As you can see, it says Prudence, wife of Captain Joshua Cottrell, a daughter of William Grinnell. Yes, the things, and actually Prudence's sister was also married to
pretty dramatic.
Joshua Cottrell. Now we'll see if I can do this. Be careful, do it. Nope. Okay, and now I'm going to let you see a little bit more of the Ide Cemetery, only because, as I said, I'm obsessed with this cemetery. Again, this was another request. An associate member of our DAR chapter who lives in Ohio, who is in no way related to the Ides, and was just found a picture of a gravestone of Ezra Ide on Find a Grave and said, "It's in Frankfurt. Can you find it? Can you do something?" And I said, "Sure. No, I'm going to do this." So I started asking around. Does anybody know where the Ide Cemetery is in Frankfurt? And a couple of people I asked looked at me like I had two heads, until I did ask one of the members of my chapter, who said, "Oh, I know where that is. I have an ancestor buried there." I said, "Can you take me there?" She said, "Sure." And as Kathy said, it is a small road, a dirt road, a track, and there it is. And you literally come into an opening clearing, and you see this absolutely gorgeous cemetery with the granite walls. You will also see, and we'll show, see this pine tree, this white pine tree on the other side. It is going to be, it is pushing the wall over, and it's really the cause of all the problems with the cemetery. You can see it again. When we arrived, there were stones leaning against the wall. They were lying on the ground. This is after we had started to clean them. We still have not cleaned all the stones, but they're all on the ground. And the reason they are here and on the ground, and we haven't worked to stand them up, is all of the bases that you can see at the foot of each of the stones have been undermined by the trees, from the roots from the pine tree, and they are all askew. So there's no way, if you put the stone into the mortise, it would be crooked and likely fall over. So until such time that somebody's going to win the lottery, I hope, and can go spend large amounts of money to remove that giant, huge white pine, and then literally it would take digging up all the roots out of the cemetery. They've been there long enough that I don't think there are any bodies left. So, you'd have to be careful to not, totally destroy stuff, but you can get the roots away from where the bases are and then stand them up, hopefully. But the interesting part about this was, next one, see if my clicker will click. This is Barbara. This is what the Ide Cemetery looked like. The Ezra Ide stone looked like on Find a Grave, and it looked just like that when we found it and took a nice color picture of it. And this is Barbara, who is working on her great, however many grandmother's stone, and Ezra's as well. This is what it looked like after we cleaned them. It is still lying on the ground because we can't stand it up, but it's a beautiful stone. It has the stylized mister at the top. Ezra Ide died with a death date and an age, so as much as we can ask. And then we found that the next time we went out there, we have another descendant of Ezra Ide who was there cleaning her great-grandmother's stone in the cemetery. And again, it's more damaged than Ezra's stone, but there it is. And so we are slowly working through this cemetery to try to get this to try to at least get the stones cleaned, and get the worst of the things that make them deteriorate off. The lichens, the moss, the nasty stuff. And you can see, Sharon has now made Jane's stone yellow, and she's on its way to white. Pardon? Black flies, yes, yes. There were numerous black flies. Black flies don't like me all that much, so it wasn't as bad for me. But poor Sharon is anyway. This is the Smart Cemetery, which is right on the corner of Belfast and Swanville, an early cemetery. And this is John Parsons' father, Shaber, and his mother, Elizabeth. I believe 5 members of my chapter are descendants of Shaber and his second wife, Mary, whose stone is also there. So we were out there and we were cleaning the worst of the stuff off the stones. They're all descended from Julia, who's over here. And I haven't ventured to see whether she's a whole lot under the ground or whatever, but since you can read her birth and death date in her information, we haven't done any more than that, because the critical thing with a gravestone is you want to be able to read the material that's on it. So we became curious, as you can see way in the back corner, to the left of Elizabeth Stone, you can see a footstone. And so we got curious because there's Shaber Stone, needless to say, broken and stuck in the ground. But in the back, there's this footstone that says SP. Okay, I'm okay. SP for Saber Parsons. And JNP. Well, there must be somebody else under there. So I decided to be really brave, and I dug around and carefully pulled out all the pieces of the rest of the stones were standing up in back of, with dirt in between them. They'd had, freezing and thawing, all kinds of awful things had happened. We pulled out the 4 pieces and kind of put them together sort of as best we could, and realized that Josiah, who is the son of Shaber Parsons, he was one of those kids. And I think that Waldo County boys, when they were 14, 15, 16, all of them decided to take the one voyage to see whether they wanted to be seamen or not. I think the vast majority of them came home and said, no way, no how, I'm going to be a farmer. But unfortunately, Josiah didn't get a chance to make that decision because he died of yellow fever in Port-au-Prince. And that's what it says on his stone, that he died in Port-au-Prince. I doubt he is buried there. But we decided this was our biggest project in terms of, okay, can we do this? And so we decided we would try to put this one together. So there we started by first, it involved digging up the base, which was, the granite base was broken underneath. So I found some people, rounded up some strong sons of people that I knew, who I had dug out around the granite base. They pulled out the base. I epoxied the base together, flattened it, straightened it with my level, put it back in the ground. So we were, we had one step along the way. The bottom piece fit in quite nicely, and then we had to deal with the next 2 pieces. And they are at this point epoxied together, held together with clamps and whatever. And then later we went back and we start to fill in the spaces around where the epoxy is holding them to keep the water out. That's the person. But then we had to deal with the top of it because the way the stones were, this part was all in the ground with stuff in front of it. So the bottom of where Josiah's name is, and then you can see where it says his son died in, and we spent a lot of time trying to say, okay, what prince, what ends Prince, and came up with Port-au-Prince, which actually you can see a little bit of it on the other side. So that was what we knew, and Janine has decided in her wisdom that she was going to give it a shot to recreating Josiah's name. And so that's a work in progress, and we will hope to put the rest of the stone together at some point, and there he will be in the cemetery. Land of Rest this is Kathy's favorite picture. So we have the Land of Rest sign in Swanville. We were out there again looking for another Revolutionary soldier, this time Jacob Eames and his family. And you can see they are in the front of the picture. The leaning stone is Jacob. The one next to him is his son. The one that's in 4 pieces on the ground is his wife. And then a daughter is the next one over. So we typically, if we find a Revolutionary soldier and the family is sort of all together, we do the spouse always. And then if we have time and energy, we work on the rest of the family. So our first job was to sort of figure out, and you can see me in the middle of the other one. We've got where we've figured out just what it's going to take to get Jacob to be standing up, and because it was wiggly, and we dug around it and we got it to be standing up. And you can see there we put it back in the ground. We're putting sods around it. No, we're not. We're still taking it out. In the middle, the bottom part of the stone was broken off where it had been in the base. And so we typically, you can't repair those because it doesn't have enough strength because that's right on the break of the base. So what we typically do is put the broken pieces in, we bury the broken pieces with the stone. So that, and then, so it becomes lower than it would typically have been. But it was in the base, cemented in the base with dirt put around it and moss, and now it needs to be cleaned. It was leaning like this, we couldn't clean it. And there is, you can see Elizabeth, you can see Josiah is short, but there he's there, and the stone on the left, you can see that's one of the stones there's a two-piece stone, it's gone over. You can see the iron pin that's broken off. And so in that case, it will have to be core drilled out, and then both there and in the base to get it clean, replaced with a new pin, put back, and that's above my skill set. I'm not doing core drills. But I'm not sure what we can do with Miriam, his wife. She has at least 2 and perhaps more failed repairs. There's all kinds of horrid goop on the edges. I mean, stuff that you cannot imagine what they used. I mean, I've seen things that they were put together with what looks like roofing cement. Unbelievable things that people thought were a good idea. But anyway, so I'm not sure. The thing that's interesting about Miriam is that she is Jacob Eames. Jacob Eames is her second husband. Her first husband was Josiah Parsons, Shaber Parsons' mother. So she is Shaber Parsons from 2 stones ago, his mother. And so I would love to get it fixed, but I'm not sure that she is fixable, just because of there are people who do, iron things around the edges, or not iron anymore. Well, they used to do iron, but I'm not sure whether we can do so. She is on the ground as best, she's safe on the ground. And then this, I don't know whether you could, in the previous ones, you can see this. You see this little tippy over stone in the back? And this is what happens when you get distracted. Yeah. Yep. Really? Yeah. Well, it's in the back, but oh, see, my clicker, my pointer doesn't work. Yeah, let me see. It's that one. And so we were, it's right there. And there it was. And it's a stone for 2 little girls, Miriam and Keziah. One was 5 and one was 7, as I remember. And we looked at it and we said, oh, oh. So the decision was made, we're here, let's do it. So we first cleaned off the goop, because all of that licheny stuff does deteriorate the stone over time. So you do want to get it off. Dug the hole. It does not have a base. It's just a plain tablet stone. You can see one corner of the base is broken off, which means that it's not terribly stable. But it's safe. If it falls over again, all you have to do is go dig it up, straighten it up again, and put it back in again, because it won't break. It'll just go over. And there it is, looking perfect. Yes, Kathy?
It says, let's straighten this out a little bit. 3 hours later, he's got this huge hole done.
No,
Yes.
It's not a huge hole.
It's a huge hole. It looks fabulous. Of course, you have to justice by the little girls, but rabbit holes start really quickly.
This is the last of the terrible stones. This is Huntsman Memorial Cemetery in Liberty. Again, a stone that you could probably not even read. When we first saw it, that's what it looked like. And on DAR's day of service in 2004, we had finished cleaning it. We had it was again one that was cemented in. Well, it wasn't cemented in. It was there anyway. Broke off right at the bottom. it was a fairly clean break. So we could epoxy it back together again. And we have since gone back and filled in the crack to then keep the water out. Yep. We have, this one took a long time. Hunt Cemetery is a private cemetery. And the member of our chapter who lives in Liberty, she was on the phone with people forever saying, you know, blah, 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 blah. Once they saw what we could do, then they said, oh, could you do some other stones? Mm-hmm. So the trustees of the cemetery. The advantage of Smart Cemetery is I'm a trustee of Smart Cemetery. In Swanville, the first selectman is, the third selectman is in charge of cemeteries, and we've worked with him. We have permission to work in Grove, having talked to them. We've had conversations with the town manager in Northport, who has, and my agreement with him is we tell him when we're going to go to a cemetery. So I send him an email and say, we're going to be in XY cemetery on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. And sometimes he comes over to see what we're doing. And then I send him pictures of what we did afterwards. So it's sort of the agreement with, you know, sort of you have to work through whatever cemeteries. Right now, we're mostly documenting, and, you know, you don't need permission to document with your tape measure and your level. You know.
Northport, he was there for the day the video was magic happening.
Oh.
So he does. Yeah.
Yep.
When we check the private rural areas that are on piece of property, that property gets sold. What? Is it state law or how does that work?
It is state law that they are to be maintained. The cemeteries are to be maintained by the new owners. Whether they do or not, it's also state law in Massachusetts that any cemetery that has a veteran in it, the town is responsible for making sure that it's at least mowed. You know, that's sort of the extent of what you get. You don't get that they, you know, they do a great job. They don't necessarily repair them, but they're required nominally to have them mowed. That is Maine. That is Maine law. But yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've known guys that have contract and 6, 7, gotten it over on a piece of property, just had to hold something and just quietly disappear from it.
Yep. Oh, that happens.
20 minutes to the bulldozer and it was never there.
No, it was, and that's very true. And unless there's family members who know about it and can raise holy hell, you know, they lots of them disappear, which is, and even especially if it's a couple of stones in the back field, you know, people are real tempted to pull out that stone and let's make a coffee table with it or whatever.
They show and
Yep, they do. Yep. In some ways, the ones that are lying on the ground covered with muck are safer than the ones, than some of the other ones. If anybody knows anything about the sort of the Nichols from Searsport, there's always this controversy of who spells their name C-K-L-E-S and who spells it C-H-O-L-S and all of that. You know, yes, they're all related and they're all descendants of James Nichols, who was not a soldier, but did patriotic service during the Revolution. And he has a lovely stone. And I have yet to figure out what the deal is with this one, because it's a granite slab and it's up in the air. And what I have learned about granite slabs is that they're supposed to be in the ground with the stones on top, but we don't have a choice. And there it is sitting above ground. The only advantage to it being that way is that the weed whackers don't, you know, the string trimmers don't whack the bottom of the stone. They're on granite. So maybe they're safer that way or not. But anyway, here's James, his wife, Hannah, I think, and his 2 unmarried children. And this, I don't know whether you can see them well enough, but you can see it on Anna Nichols' stone. James' stone is spelled C-K-L-E-S. His 2 children's stones are spelled C-H-O-L-S. So it was just kind of random. Let's spell it the way we want to spell it. This was after the first go, because Anna has now become yellow. But you can see on the bottom, you can see the broken piece on the bottom of Hannah's stone. So here we were cleaning. Sharon making that stone look worse than it looked before. Um, and then we actually found in the grass in front of the stone, we found the two broken pieces from the bottom of Hannah's stone. So we epoxied them back together. And there is Hannah's stone with its bottom. There's one little corner still missing. We couldn't find that little piece in the grass. It might still be there, but I don't know. And then after the winter, again, the one marble stone is looking very nice, very pretty. The three slate stones, mostly the slate stones need to have lichen and things like that taken off them. They do grow kind of nasty things, but they are fairly strong so that you can in fact do a little elbow grease on to get the stuff off those stones. Unlike the marble stones where you have to be very careful that you don't take half away the stone. And then this was again, there we were working on the nickel stones. We turned around and we saw a stone that was lying on the ground. The base was there, the top was dunk in back, broken across the middle. Someday I'm going to do big.
You can look at it. It's actually nice. Well, you have put arms on it. It's a little trickles of dirt. I'm quite in my right mind.
We have put epoxy on the bottom half of it. And we typically lift the stones with 2x4s and clamps, so they have handles. Otherwise, you're trying to hold them with your hands and it just doesn't work.
Can you hold it while I get the?
I can.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay.
It's not going anywhere. It's very, very much right happily there.
Okay.
Not long. I mean, we typically leave it overnight only because, you're going away.
I've got hay.
And you can see what we do is we put the vertical braces on, but then keep it from wiggling.
You know
while it dries.
They're loose because, these are tight because they've never been done brand new.
Okay, we'll work on it.
This way?
No, with the clamps on the board.
Oh, yeah, that would help.
Uh,
Okay, here we go.
So I see you have gloves on. Tell me why you have gloves on.
Because the epoxy is totally nasty.
Ah,
I'm gonna put the other one on and then we'll get.
It's a
the other-
two-part epoxy, and it's
I asked them
especially
if they could do
designed
more of this.
to not
I-
turn yellow. Most two-part epoxies will turn yellow, and this one, as best we have now, it stays clear.
Where were you? Where, what do you mean?
Where are you asking for that?
Oh, at Rob's Hardware.
Okay.
I try to,
Yep.
and they have the bigger ones.
Oh, okay. And Jane's thumb. This is-
And I've got hay. We haven't lost.
Oh,
touch with
come
the-
on.
Okay, I have both sides of the sticks.
You know what?
Okay. And this is sort of the rest. Then we take off the handles once we have the verticals on there. And you can see we're working on the verticals. And there, we're just going to let it sit for a while. And then the next one. And then you can see it's now, we cleaned the top. And we are, in this case, we're working on filling in the cracks where the stone, when it fell, little edges of the edges have gone. Again, with special compound to keep the water out, so they don't go again. So that's the easy, clean break, epoxy, put it up. And I will say one little aside, just because Janine and I were working out in the cemetery and we had a stone that we needed to stand up. We could lift it up when it was in two pieces. So we'd epoxied it back together again and we looked and said, okay, how do we do this? At which point there was a couple in the cemetery, just randomly around. He was doing push-ups, whatever. He was, running around doing push-ups. And they were just about to leave when we realized that that perhaps we couldn't lift this stone by ourselves. I went literally running across the cemetery and said, wait, 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 can you help us? And they came back. They were absolutely delighted to help us. We had a nice conversation. We took pictures, showed them. And so that's, just ask for help. And people, they didn't think we were too weird. And the guy was a bruiser. I mean, he was like, whoa, no problem. So we got our cemetery, we got our stone standing up, just like we wanted it to be. Just a couple of things. Cleaning water is always best. If you can clean off the gucky stuff by spraying it with plain old water, low pressure water, scraping with plastic utensils, soft brushes. Repairing is again with epoxy that doesn't yellow, and then filling in with a special kind of a filler that landscape management, as you can see, get rid of the damn big trees. And that's it's a problem in several of cemeteries. There's a beautiful stone in Village Cemetery that's a very, very tall obelisk from a prominent Searsport family. Actually, it's the descendants of the Fowlers who owned the big yellow house at the front of the Penobscot Marine Museum. It's his wife and children. And a very large tree in the back dropped a branch, and this very tall, very beautiful monument is on the ground. I mean, it's got to be 12 feet tall. I mean, it's very tall on a base. It will take, a cherry picker, something to get it up. So those are the kinds of things that, keep the big trees away if you can. And I know the trees are beautiful in cemeteries, but as you can see, that white pine has done a job in Ide. That cedar tree in back of the Pickering Cemetery, that stone will look just as bad in a few years, just because it's right there under a cedar tree. And then document and make sure that whatever you do, that you know what you're doing. As I yelled across the cemetery, no, you don't put the pins back in, and a friend of mine, actually, Carol, who's sometimes on here, she was going to have a stone from one of her ancestors repaired out on Islesboro, and I knew about this, and she said the stone was leaning, and my picture of her was that it was a monument. It was a big square bottom with and with those tip, you really worry, because if they fall over, they'll kill somebody. So you really do need to straighten them up. And so I said, so what is this stone like? And she showed me a picture. It is a tablet, maybe with a base, maybe not. I couldn't tell from the picture. And she had a monument company that was going to come out with cement and fix it for her. And I said, no, you're not going to have a monument company come out and fix that for you. I said, several of us could go out to Islesboro and fix that stone in an afternoon. I mean, it's really leaning. I mean, it does need to be straightened. But, please, 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 please don't let the monument company go near it with cement. So that's and a couple of things. The Atlas Preservation is the company that we have been ordering things from. They have now come up with their own solution and don't sell D2 anymore. And when I spoke with some people at the recent MOCA meeting, they said the National Park Service did research and said D2 is the way to go. We're not changing. So we will be hunting, we'll be hunting down a supplier, because it's very expensive to ship gallons of liquid. I mean, and so it was when they were coming from Connecticut, it wasn't so bad, but if they have to come from farther away, it's going to be more of a problem. But we are going to stick with D2 and water, and nothing else. And hopefully we'll continue to work on stones. Okay, hi. Ooh.
How did some of you learn how to do these stone cleanings?
Oh, and who prompted you to say that question? Janine and I and several other people and Jane, no. Did you go to? Anyway, okay. Yeah. That's a good plan. It's a lot easier than MOCA, the Maine Old Cemeteries Association, offers twice a year They call them beginner courses. I don't know what the advanced course is because, and they teach you how to clean, straighten tablets, how to do monuments together. They also teach you how to use, a tripod to lift heavy stuff. They also teach, although neither of us they never got to it for either of us, how to replace those blown out stones when you have to, core drill them out, put them up. But I'm not sure I even want to do it if I know how. I would use a tripod, except that I'm a little nervous because they are dangerous. Stones are heavy, and if the tripod falls over on you, you could be very dead. And I'm not going to hurt myself pulling a stone out of the ground, and I'm not going to hurt myself cleaning one. And some of them may have to wait for somebody with more skill than I. Jane?
When I was at Montville in the Halldale Cemetery
Yep.
on Saturday, I was helping with that tripod a lot, and they are really neat.
Oh,
And they're, multi faceted, and it's because the ground is uneven in cemeteries. However, what I took away was that there was usually at least two people. I was not in charge of anything to do with the tripod, but there were always two people, and one of them, when one person was saying something, the other was verifying what was to be done, and one person was always watching to see if one of the legs came out, so then it would be not a tripod but a bipod, and it's really effective. But the trainings are wonderful, and it felt like a one-on-one training that day, and everyone was always looking at feet and before any chains were used to do that. But it's a really good way to do that through the Maine Old Cemeteries Association.
One thing, find somebody.
Hold on, no, wait, no.
If you find somebody that would let you borrow one, because I had a roommate back in the 70s that one weekend got a hold of an engine hoist and pulled the engine block out of his car.
Yeah.
Those lift heavy things like that easily, and they're designed to be portable, and you can wheel them around.
yeah,
And
big,
go up along, it's an engine hoist, has an arm that goes out with the hooks to a hoist, and obviously they're made to pick up engine blocks. So-
actually, Charlie Smith from Smith Memorials in Searsport has a tripod, and we have borrowed it for some work we were doing down with a friend of mine that we were doing down in on Cape Rosia, down on the peninsulas. We borrowed Charlie's tripod, but the people I was working with had used a tripod before, and so my job was I can wrap. Basically, what you do is you wrap strapping around the stone, and you think it's going to come undone, but they're tucked under, and so the more it pulls, the tighter it gets, and those, up they come. When I took the MOCA class, there was a Revolutionary stone that was tipping like this, and one of the things that they say is if a stone is tipping more than 20 degrees, it's in danger of falling over. And one of the things they were concerned about was because it was a Revolutionary soldier, people were likely to come look for it, potentially touch it, potentially push, and it would go over. So that was our mission. And I was there with Henry's daughter, and we volunteered to dig the base out for this stone. And one of the things if you're digging around stones, you have to use plastic utensils. And if anybody's ever had a plastic trowel, yeah, plastic trowels are just, please. I wouldn't dig a plant in my garden with a plastic trowel. Anyway, the base was this big. It was this deep, and they had very nicely pulled, they'd used the tripod and pulled the base out. Our job was, because it was crooked, was to make it flat. Inside that base, somebody in their wisdom had decided that if you put big rocks in the bottom, it won't move. There were 3 rocks that were this big that we were digging around with our plastic trowels so that people could come along with 2 sets of, iron rods. Crowbars, there we go. I'm having word finding problems lately. I don't know what it is. Crowbars, 2 sets of crowbars to get those 2 big stones out after we had dug them out with our plastic trowels. So it was a lot of digging. But then once it was all out, then we had to, fill it with good, gravel stuff that was not going to move. Because if anybody knows what happens with big rocks in Maine, freezing and thawing, up they come. They appear in your garden. Well, they appeared unevenly under this huge monument. So, I mean, I find it, I got bored with cleaning stones. That's too much like vacuuming or washing your kitchen floor. But it is more magic than your kitchen floor or vacuuming. Much more magic. It's much more satisfying. But the repairing I find is a real challenge. I want to fix them. I want to get the ones that are lying there on the ground all covered with yuck. And I want to get them out, stand them up, and let people be able to enjoy them and read them, which is the critical thing, which is why we're there, is to get them legible. Yep. See, I get to wear the microphone.
There has been cemeteries in the news a lot recently. Could you please talk about your latest cemetery adventure? What was done, what still needs to do? And part 2, if people in this room would like to be a part of a flash mob, how they might be able to participate in that.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm really getting my steps in today.
Since I do it, would you also discuss the documentation that goes on with it?
Yep.
Because someone might not be able to get down, work on it, but the documentation takes a lot of work and we need help there too.
Yep. What we do to document the stone, we have a form that Mocha made up. And what we do is we measure the stones, we get a GPS location for them, we make a drawing of what the front looks like with the inscription exactly written out. And Jill is the very best documenter. If she's there, she does great. She can learn how to do it. I don't draw very well, so I'm always happy that somebody draws better than I do. But what we're doing is documenting what the stone looks like right now, what we've done to it, what it looked like when we started. It was lying on the ground covered with up. We've now stood it up, we cleaned it, we've got it up, we've epoxied the bottom. We write exactly what you did so that if it falls over again, somebody knows what you already did. They also know what materials you used.
Says word for word.
Yes, absolutely. And we try to read, if they have poems, inscriptions on the bottom, we try to decipher them. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Sometimes it doesn't work. But so what you're documenting is sort of everything that's on the stone.
Who does that go?
It actually goes to Mocha. They have a project there for the 250th. They want to identify again all of the Revolutionary gravestones in Maine. We are very lucky. I should say that as a project, we're very lucky because there aren't very many of them in Waldo County. And I made the commitment to try to do Waldo County because this part of the country was not really settled at the time of the Revolution. So the soldiers that are buried here served somewhere else, came here and died here and have stones here. But their service was elsewhere. So that's a lot of the New Hampshire folks who came across to Belfast, a lot of them came up from southern Maine and then died here and have gravestones. What was the other part of your question? Halldale. As many of you have seen in the news, vandals decided in their absolute wisdom that knocking over stones was a great fun thing to do. And they knocked over, I believe, somewhere around 40 stones in the Halldale Cemetery in Montville. And I know this sounds horrible. It was not as awful as I thought it would be. I was afraid most of them are not broken. That's the good news. but lots of them are the ones that are the two-piece ones that are held together with pins. And so all of them to be replaced have to have the pins drilled out, replace the pins, stand them back up again. Some of them, because I didn't want to clean stones, I wanted to do something a little more productive. I went with Janine and we took some stones that were in danger of falling over and we straightened some stones, to get them vertical again. Work that needed to be done that was not necessarily related to the damage, but needed to be done in the cemetery. So it's going to be a long haul. It's going to be expensive, because most of those stones are going to take tripods. They're going to take trained people to do them. There were people there, and I think were they paid or were they volunteers? The ones that were there on Saturday? The people with the tripod. No, it wasn't. They were volunteers. There were people from a gravestone company that were there with their equipment who were working. But they did a few stones, but they're a lot over. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not fast. Oh. And nice people, guaranteed, for the most part, jerks don't go to cemeteries. They're the ones that knock them over, not the ones that are out there in the broiling sun. If anybody remembers what Saturday was like, it was hot. And it was just as hot as that when both of us went to the MOCA training, just as hot. They don't do them on nice cloudy days when it's 60 degrees for some reason.
What was really nice at Halldale, the vandalism site on Saturday, is that some of the family members of the people whose stones had been knocked over were there watching what was going on. So yeah, it was nice.
And for the stones that need cleaning, anybody can be taught to do that.
And on Sunday, I got a message from another DAR chapter that said, hey, in case your chapter wants a service project, our chapter can join your chapter and maybe we can all go to the Halldale Cemetery. And I said, that's an idea, but please know there was a whole bunch of people there yesterday. You're looking at a full day's worth of work up there already. So
what I heard from the Halldale Cemetery people is that they would really like to have people contact the town office because the selectmen were there, as well as Cemetery Association people. And rather than just having people come in,
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
they want to have some coordination
No,
done.
absolutely.
So, yeah. So rather than just
Showing
showing
up.
up.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to put on my, my Penobscot Marine Museum hat. They are running a series of 4 workshops. One is organizing your photo collection, safely handling of antique objects, intro to digitizing photo for cultural heritage, storage of items in historic house. Okay, and how to preserve family letters. How to preserve family letters, antiques, and heirlooms. There are some pocket ones that are going to be upstairs if anybody's interested. You can sign up for 1 or more. They are $60, but they are intended to be not for beginners, but sort of intermediate to advanced information. So you send me an email, and it's really hard. It's debnowers@gmail.com. And if anybody would like to, you will just get a message in the mail. You'll get an email message, and it's come if you want, don't come if you don't want. If you're not busy, fine. I have never had a time that I was out there by myself. So at least one person has arrived every time I did it. So, and I'm delighted. It's great. It's fun just to be out there working together. And Jill and I have started a whole bunch of documentation papers for Grove. So shortly, there will be a call for, all I'm looking for is somebody else to help Jill and me document, because there are a good many stones in Grove. So it's right in town. If anybody's being bored, you can come down to Grove and we'll show you how to document. Yeah, nope, you can even sit on a camp stool. So anyway, thank you.